Welcome to Wednesdays with Willa. I'm your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern. And I am excited to have today as my guest, Nancy Lombardo.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. It's so nice to be here in person.
I know, it's awesome.
It's awesome. We were just talking, it's been like 2 years.
Way too long.
Yeah, way too long.
And we're next door neighbors, and I have to say, Nancy's my favorite neighbor.
Sorry,
neighbors out there. We just click. It's a lot of fun to know that we have each other's backs, especially throughout the things that happen in life. And Nancy's been on the show before. We've had great discussions. We did a really intense one about suicide. If anyone wants to look back at the archive videos of Wednesdays with Willa, you can look on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium, and you can do a search for Nancy Lombardo on there, and things will pop up. You've done things about breathing and connecting with wellness, mind, body, spirit. Over the years, and this is year 5 of Wednesdays with Willa, so you've got lots of videos you can look back on. I know some people tell me they binge watch the show.
Like Netflix.
Yeah, like Netflix. And it also goes onto my YouTube channel, so you can check things out there. And for the audio version, you can go on to blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio. I'm part of the Lilydale Radio family, so there are different shows that air throughout the week with various hosts. With my show, I typically have a special guest on the show. Sometimes I do fly solo, and we talk about something relating to either spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And it's really a wonderful time to share with all of you. And before I forget, I want to make sure that I mention that I'll be teaching a class that is specifically geared toward developing mediums. And it's a guided spiritual assessment so that you can really connect in with your path and understand it from a different level, that instead of the mental level, the ego level that we tend to examine our path with. And so I encourage you can sign up on my website, which is willowhite.com, and that will be on March 20th. So I look forward to seeing some of you there. And as far as our show today, our topic is helping the helpers. And so often the helpers don't get the help that they need because they're so busy doing things. And I want to explain to you why Nancy Lombardo is the perfect person to talk about this today.
You're so cute.
Well, it's true. So Nancy, for those of you who don't know who Nancy is, you're going to love her. Nancy is a retired police detective. Can you believe this woman used to wear that uniform?
Well, as a detective, we were plain clothes.
Well, detective, when she got
But I did 15 years in a uniform. So
that's right.
Yeah. 15 years uniform, 12 years detective.
Wow.
So yeah.
And military.
And military before that. So 32 years.
A lot of service.
Yeah, 32 years.
And we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
And she serves the Lilydale community as well. She is the president of the Church of the Living Spirit, which is what I consider my home church.
And we consider you family. So,
yes. Absolutely. And we really appreciate your endeavors in that area. But you keep up service in a lot of other ways. And one of the important things that's part of your background as a retired police detective is that you were an advanced hostage negotiator.
Yes.
Which I can only imagine, wow, to be in that crucial situation. We've all seen the TV shows or the movies where things like that have happened, and Nancy's been in the thick of it. And in today's world, she is currently a crisis line listener. So you continue to help people navigate their lives by listening closely, using those negotiating skills to help the helpers. And I can't wait to have this discussion with you today. Oh, so if you're a helper out there, there are all kinds of helpers in the world. If there's a way that you are thinking you'd like to be helped, you can put that in the comments too. Or if there are ways that you want to help the helpers, you can put that in the comments too.
Absolutely.
All right, let's start it off.
Well, I would just like to say that when I retired and came here, I was trying to find a way to intertwine my police work with my new spirituality. So the way I came up with was to become a crisis line listener, which even though I was an advanced hostage negotiator, they still sent me to school again. So I went to another 40-hour training because, being a listener and negotiator, they're actually two different things. However, when I got there to the school, they automatically knew I had experience the way you can handle the situation.
Yeah.
But it was still interesting to learn. But because I just need to keep my police work still active and viable along with my spirituality, and this seemed like the perfect way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And being a good listener is also being
empathic.
Yeah.
Using your empathy.
Yeah, for
strongly
sure.
Connecting.
So,
energetically with someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So in saying that, I was doing some research. Of course, the detective in me, when we know there's a topic, Nancy's going to do research.
You bet.
But I was quite surprised to learn, and a lot of times when you hear about the crisis lines, you automatically assume that they're suicide lines, which the majority of them are those kind of lines.
Sure.
But crisis, of course, incorporates any kind of crisis that someone's going through. But anyways, the statistics only go to 2020. They don't have 2021s yet. 2020, 2.4 million calls nationwide.
Wow.
2.4 million calls. Isn't that number just astonished me?
And that was, some of that was pre-COVID, but then
No,
after,
well, yeah, you're right. 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's. And I looked up for the state of New York. Since we're in New York,
Yes.
there were 57,276 calls just in the state of New York to a crisis line, and that's unbelievable to me. Of course, they did say the lines have spiked since COVID, but I liked this due to prolonged national trauma.
Yeah.
Prolonged trauma, because I don't even think people understood how this was affecting them. How it did become a trauma, and for some people it became a crisis.
Yeah.
Isolation became a crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're cut off from resources, you're cut off from people, human connection and touch even. The smiles taken away, all kinds of things.
Well, I can't remember the day. I know it was March, like 20th, I want to say, thereabouts.
Yeah. Mid-March.
Mid-March,
basically.
I mean, everything just boom. So unexpectedly, without warning, without notice, without knowing how it was going to mentally and physically affect you, and it affect millions.
Yeah, millions. Absolutely. I remember seeing an article that came out in April that talked about our particular county and how there had been a spike in crisis things that had gone on. And so this is something that whether you're going through it yourself or you're helping other people go through it, it's something that on a national, state, county, community level that we really need to be looking at how to help other people, but also to help those people who are in the thick and in the trenches, right?
Right. Because of course they considered it now a growing mental health issue.
Right.
But I say this, and I've said this before, we've had a mental health issue. It just hasn't ever been recognized. Mm-hmm. We've had many phone calls, probably millions of phone calls to these lines. It just hasn't been recognized. Right. Because now I think more people are trying to help. Mm-hmm. More people are trying to help the helpers. People are trying to help people, and so it's become more aware of that scenario. But another thing most people don't realize is a lot of these people that answer these lines are volunteers. So they're trained volunteers, but there's very few people that answer these lines that are paid. So you're donating time. Like when I do a shift, we were doing 12-hour shifts, which is a pretty long amount of time.
Yeah, it is.
Now we're down to 8-hour shifts, and you have to at least say you work at least a minimum of one time a month, which many of us do more than that. Sure. But I also noticed, like I was on the lines the other day, and it's just a different type scenario. I was thinking about the difference between being a negotiator and a listener, and one of these, they're talking about what it takes to be a listener, but the strong ability to work both independently and within a team. Yeah. And I think that was one of the biggest differences being a negotiator is I always had a team with me. Right. Okay, right? Yeah. I had a partner that sat there and helped me listen, basically. Mm-hmm. Took notes of the scenario, what was going on, who is this person. And then past that, I have like a TAC team behind me in case we have to go tactical with it. Right. So it was a whole team. I mean, that's okay. It's just
Yeah.
part of the job.
Yeah, it's part of the team.
You're just looking over.
Right, I'm imagining this in my mind. It is just like on TV and movies then.
Oh, totally.
How they have that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
they got that right, guys.
I mean, that's exactly how it plays out, because what we do as negotiators, also as a listener, is you're buying time.
Yeah.
Okay, you're putting time. You're trying to de-escalate the situation. You're trying to figure out the situation, but it's just all about buying time, calming, smoothing, making a connection. So the difference as being an active listener on a crisis line, because you're at your house now, they have apps. It rings through an app. You're not sitting at this crisis center like you might see on TV. That's all gone now. It's people sitting at their houses. But the most important thing I've learned sitting at my house is, as soon as I get that call, I need to find a quiet space.
Mm-hmm.
I need to run up in my office or whatever and find a space, because I know I have to devote these next several minutes or an hour, however long it's going to take, to be able to keenly listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And your mind can wander really quick when you're talking
Sure.
to somebody.
Sure.
Distractions, whatever, cell phone or whatever, it could really be distracted. But you have to be able to learn to be a keen listener.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the number one thing I would say. And not only that, you have to make a connection with a person that you don't even know from Adam.
Yeah, within a few minutes, you got to be best friends somehow.
Yeah, who are you? What's your problem? And if they're calling you, there's a problem.
Yeah.
There are a few people, we call them, that are repeat callers. They get to where they're just lonely.
Yeah.
And they just want someone to talk to, and they have to understand this isn't that kind of scenario.
True.
We're here for an innate crisis in your life, not because you need someone to talk to.
Right. Well, people are lonely.
Yeah.
it does, and that can escalate them into a crisis. But as you're saying, this is about something more immediate, where they may be considering drastic actions. They, on a life level, or maybe on a work or relationship level, all kinds of different aspects of life that they probably are incorporated in listening about the crisis.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually, I like this. I pulled up the exact definition of a crisis, and I like the way it worded it. Crisis is a state of feeling, an internal experience of confusion and anxiety to the degree that formally successful coping mechanisms fail.
Yeah.
And ineffective decisions and behaviors take their place. And as a result, the person in crisis may feel confused, vulnerable, anxious, afraid, angry, guilt, hopeless, and helpless. And that's just the perfect, in my opinion, explanation of what happens in someone's life to call it a crisis. And they do just get confused. They don't understand what's going on. They need someone, and which makes them pick up a phone.
Yeah. And we've all been there. At some point, we've all been one or all of those words.
Yeah.
or been in those states of being, the anxiety, afraid, angry, all the whole long list of that.
Right.
And it does get to a place of, who do you turn to? Who can you call? And it's good that they have, if they don't have someone in their immediate circle, or maybe they've worn that circle out somehow, right?
Yeah.
Then they can get help in another way, on another level. And do you find that because of what we do here in Lilydale, and this consciousness of the soul, do you find that your soul also is present in that conversation with them?
Absolutely.
And how does that play into the work that you're doing with the crisis lines?
I feel like I feel them more than as a negotiator. I don't think I put that into it. Not that it was work, of course, but I don't think I let myself get emotionally tied into it as I did. And I find since I've retired, and I listen to these phone calls or I talk to these people, my emotions, and I'm stirred up, and I get to add that aspect into it, I took a call on a line about a month or so ago, and the guy on the other side was telling me this horrific scenario he had been involved in with a accident, and the mother had died, and her child was very young, critical in the hospital, and he was there at the scene. And it triggered feelings of something I'd worked before in my past. And I had tears running down my face as I'm talking to him, but I'm emotionally connected to him. Had I been in my police work, because I didn't let myself feel that way in police work, because it was, that's why I think the difference is here, being retired and taking these kind of calls as being in the scenario and taking it. I wasn't allowed to let myself feel that way. It was just handle it and move on, handle it, move on.
It's like you had an energetic bulletproof vest.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
It's energy Kevlar.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good way to put it.
That was going on with you during those times.
But also living here in a community as we do, I have learned about unfoldment, and I've allowed myself to unfold, and I've seen learned a whole different side of me, even psychically. Who would ever call any of the work we did as police officers psychic? Never. I would have never referred to it as that.
But now you look back on that and go, wow, there's some real intuitive calls that were made in the moments.
Yes.
That you can feel were soul guided or God, divine guided.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And help you in those moments. See, that's the thing. When you're sensitive, it's hard. If you can feel it almost as if it's like your own.
Right.
Right. And so I cannot imagine being on a call and not having my voice go all wonky and cryy too. So like for you to be able to just cry and that not show up in your voice, I think is incredible. I can't even do that.
I've said to Willa too, we'll be talking about stuff and you are so empathetic. I've said that to you. I'm not making fun of you. You're just so sweet because you feel, I'll say something and you feel it so emotionally. Tears come to your eyes so easily of certain scenarios, and it's precious about you.
And she'll be like, oh, there she goes again. Even right now I can feel like,
I can see you. I can see it.
But in terms of you helping them and having, you've had all that training of the Kevlar energy, and then you're noticing you can kind of not be so armadillo with it, and then you can kind of flow into the energy with them and still feel it but not take it on.
That's a very good point, because that's part of especially as a listener, the first part of the conversation is to get into a flow, is to get into a rhythm with a person, to kind of feel it out, to see where your common interests are, where you can connect with them. It is about building that flow and building that momentum, because you're not going to make any progress with anybody until you get there with them.
Right.
Okay. You can't just have what are you doing? I don't know. It can't be that kind of conversation. It has to be a personal, intimate, connected conversation.
I remember taking a psychology course, I think it's first year of college, and they were talking about this thing called the ELIZA program, and you could type in, something, and then the ELIZA program, and how do you feel about that? It's very robotic. I'm sure they've developed some more advanced robotic response thing, but it was very much like you could type whatever you wanted and it would just spit it back at you. And I don't think there'll ever be anything that can replace that human connection. And so whether someone is a police officer or an emergency responder or a minister or working in the medical situations that crop up, or working as a counselor, there's so many helpers out there. They sometimes need help themselves.
Oh, 1,000.
And so you have the crisis lines.
Not sometimes,
for I don't know if I should call them regular. What do you call them? Regular people?
I call
civilians.
I always call them civilians. I hate to do that. Like, you're a civilian.
What do you call it? So civilians, and then you have the other level of, they're in it. They're taking on their issues, other people's issues. The mountain of that starts to build within them, and so you've got crisis lines for all strata, shall we say?
Well, because, and I have my statistics on that as you're talking about that.
She's on it.
They did say, of course, For some reason, the suicide rates among teenage girls became higher in 2020. Not quite sure about that compared to the previous year. They secondly found 1 in 12 public healthcare workers reported suicidal thoughts between March and April. And it just immediately spiked because I think they were
that was the COVID time in 2020.
During the COVID time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, children, teen girls, all of a sudden they're thrown into a situation where you can only connect through social media or a phone call or a text, and there's no interfacing at school anymore, and there are all these things.
And being more sensitive.
More sensitive.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And then 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide a year. So that's a really huge community of people that will call these lines or be affected just because of social media once again.
Yeah.
And once we were shut down and put in houses and everything, it was all about social media. They were living on it.
Well, things are starting to open up more. So there'll be this transitioning time. I think there'll still be people who will be in crisis because now they have to somehow go and be social again. Yeah. And they've gotten out of the habit of how to interface with people, and now you'll have their faces to read again, like, to look at, as it were. And some people may have to work through some of the ego that is present in them that is looking in a paranoid way about how other people are perceiving them or interacting with them. Right. So there's going to be a whole nother level.
It's interesting you said, yeah, I totally agree with that. I was thinking about what you said about people being able to reach out to either their family or not. I mean, you have a beautiful family, internal, external. Do you see a reason why people would feel the need to call a complete stranger rather than reaching out to their own family?
I think it's harder for a person like me to because I feel like I can connect. I mean, you guys have met my parents. It's just
exactly right.
And I'm blessed with my husband and children, everything. And I think that's one of the things that even friends will tell me, that you don't necessarily call me up with your stuff. I'm more the person they call. Right. So I think I can connect more with the helpers, in the sense of, I think things would have to get really bad for me to get to that point. And I think by the time they call, it's that level of last ditch.
I took a call the other day when I was on the lines, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "I'm a person in crisis." And I immediately knew what that meant, Yeah. I immediately knew. But through the conversation, found out that his wife was downstairs in the house. Wow. Yet he's calling me on a crisis line. Yeah. Which I didn't find it weird, because I've seen that kind of scenario before, but it just goes to show you the disconnect.
Sometimes people cannot talk to their spouses, or maybe they've gone round and round, or for whatever.
But to be in that kind of crisis and run upstairs and call a crisis line.
Well, I mean, when we did that suicide show, we were talking about how some people can have a close connection, or someone even in the house when they commit suicide. And I mean, they're to that level of crisis that they would consider doing that instead of going to talk to the person who's in the house. Right. So it's the same thing with the line. So I'll put that back to you, the question of, can you, have you felt the need to reach out to in that level?
I have
not.
What
would it take?
Well, yeah.
What would it take?
It would take a lot, because that's a good question, because a lot of ways I still have that body of armor around me. Yeah. And I still feel like I have to help everybody else, and if I have to help myself, then I go upstairs and do yoga or meditate and help myself. Yes. Okay, yes. So
you go into self-care immediately.
Immediately self-care. I never actually think about reaching out to get somebody to help me. It's just not something I think about doing, which
I think a lot of helpers, that's going to be their problem, because they're not used to. They're the one that rescues others. They're the one that helps others.
I've never seen myself as I need to be rescued, because you're right. And in all reality, I'm sure there's definitely times where I need someone to talk to.
Yeah, because they're like, when's it going to be about me? right?
Yeah.
When is it my turn? I'm busy rescuing other people. There's somebody out there today that's listening to this that knows what I'm talking about.
But I also say, and I said this the other day when I was doing another deal, that it's humbling to listen as a listener to other people's problems because it puts mine in perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Every time. You know, I can think I'm having the worst day in the entire world, and I'll pick up that phone and someone else is having a worse day than me. And so it really puts everything I'm feeling and everything I feel about myself and my life in really good perspective really quick.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, I think that's why I put my feelings maybe a little bit on the back burner, because I always know someone else has it worse than me.
Absolutely.
And I think if we keep that, not that to downplay your crisis, because it's your crisis, and when people are in these crises, it's sometimes life or death scenarios. Yeah. So I don't want to downplay the crisis you feel you're feeling, because it's real for sure. But it just helps me put my whatever I think I'm going through on a different level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that as a medium, you know, or, you know, people who do healing, you put aside everything that's going on in your life that might be occurring. Right. And you're in that moment. You're in that bubble with that person. And it's the most important thing that's going on.
And it has to be the most, if it's not, they sense that and they feel that. It has to be. They have to be the most important thing. And I know that guy the other day, he just said, I just want to feel like I'm not a bad person. Oh. He needed that somebody, a total stranger, to tell him he was not a bad person. I don't know this guy from Adam, but did I sit there and tell him he wasn't? Yeah, I sat there and told him he wasn't. You know, I heard of some of his story, and I was able to tell him, you're not, you know, maybe we've all done some things in our life that we're not proud of. We all are there. Mm-hmm. But you have to look at the good points that we do and who we help, and we all have them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you focus on the negative rather than the positive, and when that negative is higher than that positive, that's when it ends up turning into a crisis. It builds and builds and builds. It builds. Yeah, totally.
Until you're into that extreme space of things.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, I just want you to tell me that I'm still a good person even after everything I've done. To me, that kind of goes to a spiritual level, a spiritual foundational principle that they are a spark of the divine, and as such they have unlimited potential for love and peace and joy. And there's that recognition of the soul. And I think that people go through a process of guilt or shame or horror or trauma about what's gone on with their lives, either what they've done or someone else has done. And they have to get to that place of, yes, let me remember who I truly am.
Yeah, because you have to realize, Willa, especially, you know, as a negotiator, people have done some bad things.
Yeah.
I mean, people have done some really bad things. And you can't be judgmental. You can't bring how you feel about it into the scenario, whether you think that's got to be the most horrific thing you've ever done, you know?
Yeah, like how dare you kill this person? How dare you take the hostage? How dare you? There's a part of you that would just want to go.
How dare you beat somebody up?
Yeah.
And it's you know, in your mind you're thinking, that's not okay. That's not okay that they're in the hospital and here you are talking to me. I mean, but you have to take that out of it, and you do have to go to, now I see it as a spiritual place, as a place that I see them, we're all human beings, and as human beings, like I said, we make mistakes in life, but we have to find that point that they are, there was somebody when they were born that they weren't a bad person, seriously.
Right.
Environmental, all sorts of things contribute to all sorts of things with people.
So you're trying to connect with someone's flame on the phone, basically, in that crisis line work that you're doing.
Yeah.
But we can all take that into our connections with other people too.
Right.
Talking to that flame, a divine source of flame that's in them during those moments. So in terms of helping the helpers, because you know, with your line, you are helping people who are responders and do things that are sometimes heroic or, you know, difficult, hard, traumatizing, all of those levels. What have you found? What are some of, like, maybe 3 things that you have found that are major components of most conversations you have with them? Like 3 different things, or that you would say run true, that how do you help them? For one would be the listening, I imagine. The keen listening that you've reinforced. so beautifully?
You provide feedback to what they're saying.
Okay.
A lot of times they are already solving their own problems in what they're saying. So, of course, we call it reflecting. I'm sure you've heard that term.
Yes.
Okay, and I know you know that term, but they're saying it the whole way. That goes back to that keen listening. You listen to exactly what they're saying, you give it back to them, and all you're doing is giving them their own words. They don't realize it. They think you're giving them advice.
Right.
But what advice you're giving came out of their own mouth. They just weren't able to hear it.
So that's an excellent point, that sometimes people can't hear it. They need an outside source to provide a reflecting confirmation with them.
Yeah. I don't even think it's a confirmation. I just don't think they realized they already had the tools. They knew what to do. They knew what they were feeling. They just needed someone else to play it back to them. Yeah. And hear it out of my voice, thinking that I'm the one, oh, well, you solved my problem. No, I didn't solve your problem. You already had your problem solved. You just had to hear your own problem solved.
Well, they do say that most healing is really about finding someone to witness your healing. And when you find the right witness to your healing, that somehow that you're ready to give it over, whatever it is that is the difficulty.
Yeah, I like that.
Physically or emotionally or those kinds of things. That somehow it's finding it. So when they're calling, it's like they're finding the right witness to their healing at that moment. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is a beautiful thing. And I understand that probably not all people connect on the crisis lines. I've heard it. I've heard, they didn't do me. They didn't help me out. And I think it's about using the right kind of skills and the right kind of listening, the right kind of empathy.
Well, do they grade these people? Do they grade the crisis line people?
Sometimes, I've seen complaints made or not complaint. I mean, but for the most part, almost always the ones that they've always thank you when they're done. They're thank you because they do feel a sense of relief.
Well, I think the people who are on that who are the ones taking calls, they care. They're not there.
We're not there volunteering our time because we don't care. I guarantee you.
They care and they want the best outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
But do you feel that sometimes people get to a level where they've called for help, but they can't accept the help?
Oh, 1,000, yes.
So in that instance, when somebody feels that they cannot accept help, what do you feel is the meat of that matter? And how do we get to it from another angle, perhaps?
Well, sometimes you just don't. Sometimes they're not ready to be helped.
There we go.
So you just have to bless them. And you have to bless them. You have to accept the fact that the call is gonna end up unresolved. And they're either going to end up calling back, find another resource, find their different way.
You have to trust in their journey, ultimately.
Yes, because it is their journey, and ultimately we're only helping them. helping the helper. We're helping, but you have to do your own work.
Absolutely.
I can't do
the personal
your work
responsibility of each individual person. And I know some people get so frustrated because they have a health condition and they go to a doctor and the doctor doesn't help them, and they go to another place and that doesn't help, and they this growing discontent that starts to rage in them about their situation and about their life, and they feel a crisis about their crisis.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, you're exactly right.
I feel a crisis of my crisis. And so it's like this continued. I almost wonder sometimes if the crisis of the crisis isn't worse than the crisis, kind of thing.
And there's all sorts of different scenarios. Like a lot of times you'll take a call and the person's drunk on the other end. So you got that into the scenario. And then, of course, the underlying problem with that, what? They're an alcoholic. Yeah. Or, they're high on narcotics. So you got that in the scenario. There's always this plus.
Right. Oh, there's the plus. What do you do in the plus? Eek.
And then trying to diffuse that kind of scenario, that's a hard scenario to diffuse when they're already here with alcohol or drugs or other things that can influence the way they're thinking, and you got to bring them back down. Yeah. So that just complicates the scenario and complicates their listening.
Yes,
for sure.
Because they can't. It's like wonky what they can accept in at those particular moments.
Yeah.
But there's that place within a person that does know the truth, even when they're incapacitated, I feel.
Well, because that's why they're incapacitated, because they do know the truth. So it's another coping mechanism for them that's not working. So hence why they call.
Yes. And when you're in this moment of the listening and the empathy and really trying to assist a person to grow beyond whatever the perceived crisis is, it's not about minimizing the crisis, but it's about maybe re-evaluating and categorizing it differently.
And there is always a point where if it's beyond the scope of what I'm capable of doing, we have a whole list of resources, So you get on that computer, we have a whole list of resources that we can refer them to other resources, okay? Because some people need long-term listening, they need counseling, they need AA, they need all sorts of different things that I can't provide for them in one phone call. However, maybe they might not have thought of it. Maybe they just needed that little push.
I have a curiosity. I'm wondering, how long is the average call that you take?
About 45 minutes.
45 minutes what's the longest that someone's been on the line?
A couple hours.
And then the shortest would be?
Like 10 minutes.
10 minutes. And they after 10 minutes, they were like, I'm good? That's awesome.
Yeah.
After 10 minutes, I'm good. I know I called, but wow.
Well, some problems or crises are more in depth than others.
Sure.
Like I said, a crisis isn't necessarily always suicidal. It could be an argument with a spouse. I got into it at work. I don't like what my boss did. I mean, little things can cause different crises.
So go back to the scenario of the man who he's in another part of the house and his wife is in the house. He knows he can't talk to her. He probably knows that if he tries to talk to her, it's going to make it worse.
Well, I mean, the bottom line of that phone call also was he was definitely, he loved his wife. There was a connection there, and I think I needed to remind him of that, and that she was downstairs, and that they had been married for a period of time, and that was a source that he could probably reach out to, and that it's not like she was going to throw him out the door,
But he felt that sense of, I can't talk to her for some reason.
Yeah, for some reason at that moment, yeah.
But it's good that he can just reach out and have a little moment of, and now I can.
Right.
And now I can. And I think that's the other thing that as mediums and healers and people who are really try to connect with the soul, it's a reminder to connect with the people that are here, the other souls, but also the God source, the divine source, that anytime we're in crisis, we can also make the phone call, as it were, to the divine, to the infinite intelligence, that source of all, so that we can tap into that, because it's such an important aspect of being able to move forward in a life, that when we're deeply in crisis, that we go back to those underpinnings, the secure foundations, the core.
I hear what you're saying. In a crisis conversation, religion...
Yeah, you can't go there. Yeah,
I don't go there, and
I can go there.
It very rarely comes up.
I love going there.
In all honesty, it very rarely comes up. I very rarely even.
Yeah, you're not
hear
allowed
that.
to. Yeah.
Well, I would, if they want to talk about it, I'd talk about it, but it just doesn't really come up for some reason, because I think there's a lot of times they're in a dark place that's not even.
I can't let the light in during those moments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I also think, even that scenario where the wife's downstairs, just hearing an outside perspective is just so important for people. No matter if they have a really good family, close with their family, they just need an outside, someone that's non-judgmental, non-partisan, that's not involved in anything.
That they'll never see.
They don't know you, what's the word, anonymity?
Yeah.
Right?
You can be anonymous.
That's really important to them. I don't know them from Adam. They're anywhere in the United States. Our lines answer nationwide. So here I am in little Lilydale, New York, talking to someone, whoever, and that makes it more appealing for sure. Yeah.
They're not going to go, did you know Joe down the street needs this?
Running at Walmart, there you are. We just had this conversation. Yeah.
It's needed, and I think that's probably a big part of the appeal, because they can't talk to their people. It's almost like the deep dark secret of themselves. Right. And they've done these little things on social media. You can leave a secret, and you can tell someone else's secret. So you write down your secret and you put it in the bin or the box or whatever, and then you pull out somebody else's and you read it. And so the secret is shared, but it's anonymously shared.
I haven't even heard of that.
Yeah, it's like the weirdest thing on one level, but then you're going, oh, that's kind of interesting.
That is kind of interesting.
But, you know, the people who share the secret, sometimes they're crying for the person. They feel such an empathy for what they've gone through or whatever their crisis was or the things that they weren't able to share in a public way or even in a private way with family or friends. It's kind of an interesting idea.
That's a very interesting idea.
It's not quite the crisis line, but, you know, it's that idea of it can somehow still be voiced. You know, when people have joys or concerns, sometimes they need to have that space.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Well, like you said, to the tune of there's 2.4 million calls, so there's a lot of people that obviously need an outside source to turn to and are turning to them left and right.
So what kind of coping skills come to mind in terms of helping the helpers? Helping them cope. I mean, they usually these people have been highly trained in whatever their field is, right?
Listeners?
Not just the listeners. I'm talking about the people that
Oh.
you know. You're helping the helpers when they call into that crisis line.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, there are other ways to be helped, not just a crisis line. But there's this idea of these people, be they police officers or emergency responders or medical or counselors or therapists or ministers or whoever they are, they've been highly trained or have experience in their field to kind of cope, like you did with your Kevlar, your energy Kevlar.
But that's funny you asked that, because I do ask that question. I usually ask, what are your hobbies? Oh. Because whatever their hobbies might be would be their, you know me, I'm a runner.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
This girl runs.
I'm an avid runner, but that has always been my coping skill. Do you think of running as a coping skill? Maybe
not for me.
Yeah, seriously, maybe not necessarily. But working out at the gym, I mean, there's all sorts of, cooking could be a coping skill. Yeah. There's all sorts of different things that are coping skills that you wouldn't normally think. So my question to that for them is, what's your hobbies? Because if I know what they're interested in, then I know that's how they're using to cope with their daily lives with.
Sure. Well, and some of them get to a point where they probably can't engage in their hobby because they're just too busy.
Boom, bingo. That's exactly what they tell me. I've been so busy, and lately a lot of these people, you were telling me just with your husband, they're having to work a quadrillion hours.
Yep.
They have no time for anything else besides work.
Yep.
Cut home, barely sleep, barely eat, go back to work, yes. Which has pushed them into this crisis scenario because they don't have an outlet.
Yes.
And having that outlet as part of their coping skills, if you don't have it, you're going to be that steamer that's going to just blow up.
Yes, I'm a little teapot, short and stout.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I mean, it's a perfect question, and it's just how it actually works.
And they can have resentment about the fact they haven't had a chance to do their hobby.
Total resentment,
and
yes.
that people don't understand how important that is to them, and and that can galvanize the need for that. And I think that's an important message for folks, that return to your hobby, especially if you haven't been able to do your hobby because of COVID or whatever.
Yeah.
Because of the stresses of work or family or demands on your time in other ways. Because a lot of people they've only been able to have the resource of popping on a social media and trying to connect with people that way, or not even allowed to walk in nature, some people.
And I think it's very important sometimes, and I've asked this question, have you hit that button and looked and seen exactly how many hours you're spending on your media device?
Yeah.
Because if you put it in perspective, and some of them are like 9 hours,
yeah,
it's like, whoa. I mean, whoa.
What could you have done in that time?
Yeah. So guess what? You did have time for your coping skills to have your hobbies if you would have gotten off, because, addiction.
Yes.
Different types of addictions, and that behavior's having a negative effect.
So I think in terms of the coping skills, it's about return to that sense of what you enjoy. Mm-hmm. That's a wholesome pleasure, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, it's important.
Yeah, that we have that connection on those levels, and that is a good starting place, I think, for people when they're at their threshold. What is it that you truly enjoy?
Yeah.
What's important to you?
Right. So, like I said, use that scenario rather than calling it coping skills. You call it coping skills.
And people go, eh.
Yeah.
They get that reactionary
yeah. They get that.
Coping skills.
Yeah, they think you're using psychobabble at them, and it's not. You're just trying to do real life scenarios and real life examples of what they can do to help themselves out and get themselves out of their crisis at the moment.
Beautiful. Now, I know you have some resources in mind for people who are helpers.
Well, I definitely wrote down the National Suicide Hotline because that is the most called line nationally, but it's really easy. It's 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. So that's the only one I actually listed because there's so many different crises. Like we talked, there's alcohol, there's suicides, there's narcotic, there's just so many, and there's domestic abuse hotlines. There's a million hotlines out there, of which all are answered and of which all, like I said, are trained listeners. So you have to find which one it is that you're needing, and you can call that particular number. They're all free.
What about the people that are like, I've got like 5 of those crisis lines I need to call? I'm not saying anybody does, but what if they were like, and it's like they have to then pick their way through the crisis.
Like I said,
at that point, it seems like they should really.
The
go
one I
into
answer
counseling
is a basic crisis line, so we handle any kind of crisis, which is good. And like I said, if it's something I can't do, I'll refer them to something else.
Sure.
And that would be the same scenario. I would think of any crisis line that we've been trained to do that, to refer them to other lines.
I think the other part of what I've been hearing from folks is that if they do want counseling, that there's a long wait to get in.
Well,
the
counselors are overwhelmed. They're one of the helpers.
That's the helpers. And they're just like, I can't fit any more in my schedule.
Yeah, that's been a problem.
There is such a demand. And not the supply sometimes. And so there's that knowing you have to push through somehow and get into this space of patience, even if you don't have patience anymore.
But there's other outlets too, like me and you belong to the church. There's churches, there's ministers, there's other resources like that. If you can't immediately get into a counselor or a psychotherapist, there are other resources that will listen to you.
That will listen to you.
Yeah.
Beyond the crisis lines.
Beyond the crisis lines.
I think it's really important to know the levels and the layers of, I need help, who do I call?
Right.
And
because I said our job, so to say, as a listener on a crisis line is to diffuse that immediate crisis, hopefully give them enough ideas of their own ideas and coping skills to move forward, and if not, refer them to somebody that can.
Yes.
But to always know they can call back. We do get repeat callers, not necessarily the same day or the same week. I mean, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 months. It's just, oh wow, there was actually somebody there. And it's funny, I hear that all the time. Oh, you're actually someone that answered the phone. I don't know what they think, talking to a real person. Because how many times now do we call a number and it's not a real person anymore?
True.
Or you got that automated press 1, press 2, but we actually pick it up on the first call. And they're very surprised a lot of times to actually hear an actual person.
I think that's great. I think that having to go through a whole nother layer, you'd hang up. I mean, you'd just be like, I need someone now. I don't need to be pressing the phone.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
It's the last thing you need. That could send them even more into a crisis. So I think it's beautiful that is a more reasonable expectation.
Yes.
That they will have a human on the other line.
Yeah, and it's so important to them because when you're reaching out, you want somebody to answer that phone. You want to hear a hello. We even tell them our name. We tell to make that personal connection.
Sure.
And sometimes they tell us their name, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they tell us a fake name. That's okay. It's just about transparency on our end.
Sure.
To build that trust in relationship, even if it's just 45-minute relationship, to be able to resolve whatever situation they're calling in on.
And they can call and say, I have a friend who...
And that's happened too. They don't want to refer to themselves as it their problem,
Right.
And I get that, trying to be in the closet about it. But you have to be prepared. It's so interesting because you just never know what the scenario is going to be.
Yeah.
At any given moment, you have to be prepared for any kind of scenario.
Well, your life training has definitely led you to be able to
yeah.
be ready
Yeah.
for pretty much everything that could come down the chute.
But that's actually, in my opinion, another coping skill for me because it was hard for me to retire as a police officer. I loved my job as a police, loved it. So this has been a good compromise for me, so to say, not.
So it's kind of like an outlet for you too.
Yeah,
to be able to
keep my feet in the on the streets a little bit, and be able to help people in that way because it's what I'm used to doing,
right.
And so it's really helped me out. Another coping mechanism for me to be able to answer a crisis line, if that makes sense.
Those of you who are tuning in, you can certainly write in the comments things that you know have helped helpers in your life, or ways that you have shown that you've been in that space yourself of crisis, and what you've done to get yourself through it. There are all kinds of I don't want to use the dreaded phrase, but I will, coping mechanisms, coping strategies that are out there. But it could be valuable to keep it positive. Of course, I don't expect anything less than that from you guys, but that ways that when somebody else is tuning into the show, they can really understand how to move into upliftment, because there'll be someone that is going to watch this or listen to this and need that extra reinforcement to go ahead and ask for help themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it takes courage.
It does.
It takes courage to realize that you're in a bad spot, and to be able to just know you can reach out to an anonymous person that's actually a trained person that can give you some pretty darn good advice.
I'm going back to the thing you had said earlier about how when you take these calls and when you're talking to people, it puts it in perspective. Like, the things that are going on in your life are not nearly as bad as what they are going through. I think that a lot of helpers, they're in that space too. And it may prevent them from getting the help that they need because they keep minimizing. They minimize. So there's the danger zone on that, guys. Don't minimize what you're going through so that you don't get the help that you need. Because so often, if you, as mothers or mothers of the world, Nancy's a mother of the world, mothering people through their crises. I guess would be the plural, right?
Yeah.
Would be crisis. But the sense that you sometimes don't let yourself be the one that needs that. It's the concept of wounded healer, right?
Well, that too, and the fact that it's not embarrassing.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's not something bad. It's not belittling.
But they're not used to it. It's like there's I need help. Whoa.
Right. Yeah.
There's the what on earth?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I also think it's awareness of all of it, and that's why it's good for us to talk about it today, so that people feel like they can reach out no matter who you are. And even if you are one of the helpers that are out there helping so many people, there might come a time where you might need to reach out and just talk to somebody yourself.
Yeah. Before you hit a burnout level that's, really...
Especially with the healthcare workers. Like you said, they said, especially with the COVID, they have reached beyond burnout levels, just beyond. And I imagine sometimes they don't want to go home and just talk to their family. They might need just an outside resource to talk to. And it's good to know that they're available. Yeah,
because the family usually has their whole another set of needs.
Right. You're going home to a whole different, you're exactly right about that. A whole different scenario of needs, which takes a toll. Another toll, it's like, and then that,
Yeah. And that's why people do need a vacation sometimes from what's going on in their lives and what's going on internally. And that's where meditation, that's where prayer, I think, is such a beautiful resource, because it's like a little vacation from the yammer of your mind. So
I like that
you let God steer for a while, and the divine source is chauffeuring you through life. At least for those moments, until you have to be the hero again, the helper again.
Well, I teach yoga at a local gym here, and I I slowly incorporated meditation into it, because a lot of these people, they're not familiar with it. They think it's woo-woo, whatever. But then
it's so woo-woo.
But then I notice, I've gotten a really good class, and my class has gotten bigger because they find that they like it, and it sneaks up on them, and they need it. Like I say, meditation, you can take a minute or 2 minutes out of your day of just quiet and stillness, and the results will have a really good
It does build. It does build. You really can't just try it and go, well, that didn't work, and then try another couple months later, that didn't work. It is something, it's cumulative. It's like exercise. It's like flexing that muscle that's within you to calibrate yourself, mind, body, spirit, so that you can let that be what is your normal, your default.
Yes, right. Because I've actually suggested that to some of the callers. Probably I would have never suggested that before, but have you taken some time? And I sometimes don't use the word meditate because, like I said, it scares them. Stillness. Just take some moments of stillness.
There we go. You snuck it in.
Right, yeah. Just have you taken some moments of stillness. Even if it's in your bathroom when you get home, just a few minutes of stillness with yourself and and just breathing and quiet.
Oh, and I don't want to forget, I know we're getting to the close to the end, but sometimes it's mothers, especially new mothers, that are going through so much in raising of their kids, and they don't have any time away. They're like an emergency responder constantly, or they're like a person in the medical profession, or they're having to be a counselor to their children, and they're just so fortunate that they got a shower.
Especially all the women
that needs them again.
Everybody that became homeschoolers that never worked.
Yeah.
I mean, that put in a whole scenario. I mean, you homeschool yourself, but you've managed it. But there's people that don't have those skills.
They don't have those skills. But at the same time, it's that sense of, if you really feel like you can't get away from whatever your circumstances, that stillness, knowing that you could claim that stillness in you in those moments, has been such a beautiful resource for me and for other people. And when you're going through things in your life, because sometimes if you're a helper, you think, well, that's just so silly that I feel overwhelmed by this. That's so silly, you again, minimizing of it. But you have to get into that place of, yes, I see where I needed to go to my default, my true default.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Beautiful.
I do believe that there's people that are cut out for this. There's people that can handle more stress than other people.
Oh, yeah.
You just have to know your limit. Yeah. And especially the helpers that are out there, they just have a different level, and they're able to tolerate. It takes a different type of personality. Just like it takes the personality to be able to listen on the crisis lines,
sure.
But it's just knowing, like you said, knowing where you're at.
Do you think that shifts for certain people? Do you feel like they were super sensitive and then they build up their Kevlar, or do you think they were always armadillo?
I think the ones that aren't cut out for it, so to say, they don't last. Within 5 years, they're gone looking for something else. If you're cut out for it, you're in for the long haul.
Well, what happens to the people who are used to having their Kevlar, or used to having their armadillo armor, and then that's what they're used to, and then they hit that level?
Yeah, it's recognizing it.
Is the crucial time.
Sure.
Recognizing that there's something that you can do about that, and not feel that you are going to continue to be overwhelmed.
Right.
Thank you.
But you can recognize that you don't have to have this sense of, just because it worked for me all these years, why is it not working for me now? You can be coming to that next step of whatever you're supposed to be doing.
That's a really good point. Yeah,
right. That it's the divine saying, you have done this work and you're done, and now you can readjust, and you can say, I'd like to pivot. This is my moment to pivot, and this is my moment to say, I am going to get myself into another arena of life. And that it's not a failure that you can no longer be in that helper mode of that particular space, but you can re-enlist yourself in a different arena.
Right. Yeah, I like
and
that.
Apply your energy in something that feels a bit more easy or favorable to your energetics at the time.
Right.
So I just wanted to give people a little of that too. Well, this has been
Always
great.
goes by fast.
It does
doesn't
go
it?
by so fast, and I'm very grateful that you came on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I thought it was an important topic, and I like people to know that there's somewhere they can turn to if they feel the need.
There are absolutely resources out there. You can do your searches, and you will find someone that can talk to you and help you through your issues, whatever they may be. Don't minimize it, as I have been guilty of doing in my own life.
I'm sure.
But know that you can have those resources and build that rapport with people who you'll be united with in a divine way. Oh, thank you so much for being on the show today, Nancy.
Willa.
And thank you everyone for tuning in today. See you next week on Wednesdays with Willa. Bye-bye.